And before I go on, I also need to tell you about a storytelling technique called story stacking. You may not know the term, but I'm quite sure you're familiar with the practice. Here's an example. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs whose mother sent them out to make their way into the world. The first little pig bought a load of straw, built himself a nice little house with straw. He just finished building the house when a big wolf comes, and he says, little pig, can I come in, can I come in? And the little pig goes, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. So the wolf huffs and he puffs, and what happens? He blows the house down, right? Okay, so second little pig buys a load of sticks, builds a house of sticks. The wolf comes, and he huffs and he puffs, and he huffs and he puffs. He has to puff a little bit longer. House falls down. So you see the story pattern. Third little pig comes along. He's built a house out of bricks. Wolf comes along, huffs and he puffs, and he 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 cannot blow the house down. So the end of the story is that the third little pig and possibly all of his brothers sit in the house of bricks, and the crazy wife and the crazy wolf tries to blow the house down. See, the story was begun to be told. It was published in the 1800s. The story's got a long shelf life, and it was probably told long before that, but it probably wouldn't have survived as many generations of children if it was just about a little pig who built a house out of brick, and a crazy wolf tried to blow the house down. I said wife, didn't I? So you have 3 little pigs, they buy supplies, build a house, wolf comes, and the house either falls or stands. That's the pattern. Luke actually uses something similar. He talks about a wise builder. Builds a house on a foundation of rock, and the storms come, and the floods come up, and the house, does it stand or does it fall? It stands on the rock. And then there's a foolish builder who builds on the sand, and the storm comes, and the floods go up, and the house falls flat. So that one, the only thing that stays the same is a storm. Everything else is flipped around, but it's this story stacking that makes the point. So today is one of those 3 stories that Jesus tells, and while the story of the prodigal is totally strong enough to stand on its own and beautiful enough, there is so much that we hear when we hear the echoes of the 3 stories together. It's the shaming of a family, it's the dividing of an inheritance, taking out key earning power long before it's done. And there's also a sense of urgency, of hurry. The son wants right now what's coming. He's had it with life in the house, and it wasn't long before he packed his bags and left for a distant country. So you could understand this to mean that he liquidated all of his assets and left town as quickly as possible. Sold what needed selling. And you could also expect that no respectable person in that village would actually have contributed to the shame of his father by buying any of the things that the son was trying to sell. He would have had to go far from the core of the village to find anybody who would sell what he was selling. So this would have caused the further undoing of the father's reputation in the village, as well as that of the son. If the villages do anything here, it would be to reinforce the shame of this act, and they will never let the son forget this if he ever did try to return. The villages have a long memory. And from the beginning, the description of this father is impossible to understand. It's without parallel in Middle Eastern literature. There are not stories of dads who do this. He is not deceived. His undoing for the sake of his son is fully intentional. So this is possibly the first departure from the story patterns. Neither coin nor sheep ever turned back toward the seeker, right? And there's an important moment here. Is this the third story's shift? What is the son pivoting towards? Is he pivoting from separation toward reconciliation to the father, or from pig slop to good food in his belly? If the story pivots to the son here, the son initiates his own salvation. Ken Bailey argues hard that the son has not turned to the father to be reconciled. He says the son has now devised another plan for him to be independently living outside of his father's house, outside the boundaries of family, and he develops a rehearsed speech that will be his only chance to manipulate his father into giving him a salary as a hired hand so that he can still earn his own independence. Father, I'm going to say, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Hire me as one of your hired hands. Do you hear heaven here? In the first two stories, heaven is echoing the celebration, but here the son calls heaven in almost as a witness to divide him further from the father. And in turning back to the village to face the shaming ceremony, because the villagers have not forgotten, the villagers may be waiting for him to come back, but it's not with anticipation or grace. To face the shaming ceremony for losing the inheritance, and he may even be the most lost when he comes to the border of the village. He got up and he went home to his father. Now the story rhythm kicks in again with a shift in pace because the seeker, the father, goes after his lost son. And if the son enters the village, the villagers will begin this shunning and shaming ceremony, which they know well. But while he was still a long way off, the father saw him and was filled with compassion for him, and he ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. That is a run of shame, my friends. It would have been shameful for the son to be walking through that village, but it was shameful for a Middle Eastern respected father to pull his garments up so that he could run. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. He doesn't finish his speech. He doesn't make a suggestion that he return as a hired hand. Because at this moment, for the prodigal son, this is the moment when he's found. He lets himself be found. He doesn't finish his rehearsed speech asking to earn his way out of the deep hole he's created. Like the sheep, like the coin, he lets the seeker, his father, find him. The welcome and rescue of a lost son has pushed the elder, obedient son out into the fringes. And the father responds immediately. He pivots. He's the seeker who knows when one is lost. And now the father humiliates himself again. For the second time that day, he leaves the feast celebrating his younger son, leaves his honored guests, and goes for a public conversation and confrontation with his son. I have slaved and never disobeyed you. But I was not even worthy of a feast of a kid. You didn't even slaughter a goat for me. It's almost a mirror image of what the younger son said. The younger son said, I've sinned against heaven and you, not worthy to be called your son. God the Father, God the Son here running to the prodigal, pleading with the eldest son, doing everything that's needed for reconciliation. Does not want hired hands trying to earn their way back to the table in shame. Does not want legalistic children trying to do the right thing to earn their inheritance or their reward. Wants the mess of sons and daughters at the table. Honored not because of anything that they've done, but because he ran to them. He runs to us.